Well, hey, everyone, this is Heidi St. John. Welcome to the Heidi St. John podcast. My guest today is Colonel Jeff Williams. He served 27 years in the United States Army and is continuing to work with our nation's space program. Jeff's been an astronaut since 1996 and flew a record-setting 534 days on 4 space flights to the International Space Station. Jeff and I have been chatting this morning about the meaning of science. You guys are familiar with the term trust the science. We've certainly had that thrown in our faces for the last several years, and I think people have become inherently distrustful of science. We often wonder what science even is anymore, and Jeff is obviously an expert in this area. I am honored to have him in my studio today. He happens to live in one of my favorite places on the face of the earth, Battleground, Washington, and we got such great feedback from Jeff being here the last time. I've invited him back again. This is going to be a great conversation. If you've got your homeschooled kids around you, bring them in because they're going to love this conversation. You guys, I'm glad you're here. Stick around. I think you're going to be encouraged. Well, thank you guys for listening today. Today's podcast is being sponsored in part by my friends at the Functional Medical Institute. You guys can find out more by going to homeschoolhealth.com. All right, I have so much I want to talk to my guest today about. By the way, I should have mentioned that Jeff's been married to his wife, Anna Maria, for a long time. How long have you and Anna Maria been married?
It'll be 45 years in December.
45 years. Congratulations.
Yeah,
Congratulations.
You.
Welcome back.
Thank you. Good to be back with you.
I'm glad you're here. All right. I just have... we've been talking for several minutes about, kind of the direction we want to take the podcast today. And there's so many things that we could talk about. But toward the end of our conversation, you touched on something. And I was like, oh, that is a great jumping off place. And that is, what is science? Because I think before we talk about science, we probably should define it. We have now for the last several years, people become very distrustful. Mm-hmm. And I think rightly so. Mm-hmm. There's posters out in front of a bunch of yards where I live that say, in this house, we trust the science, and we all got, taken for a ride by Father Fauci, the high priest of the Branch Covidians. We see Jeff Bezos in the name of science, and I put that in air quotes for people who aren't watching this, launching people into space, right, on the Blue Origin. And I don't think people can agree on what science is anymore. So I kind of like to start there because you follow Jesus, and you're not only a Christian, but you're also a scientist. So what is science?
I've always loved science since as long as I can remember. I think I was really lit up for science in 6th grade. And yes, I've worked in science all my career. I still love science. I love to encourage science. Science is really trying to understand the provisioning of God's creation. It's what's in God's creation that's useful to us. We in the church world, in the biblical world, will acknowledge that things in the creation are given for our good and for God's glory. And scientific endeavor is really a component of the dominion mandate right there in Genesis 1. Now, what prompts your question, of course, is this bumper sticker kind of attacks, if you will, of science. Now, science institutionally in modern times, through the 20th century, it grew this way. Of course, we had great advancements in science, and a lot of our technology that we take for granted nowadays is a result of scientific endeavor in the past. And, of course, technology continues to accelerate. So there's a lot to it, but it's out of reach of the conceptually of most people. And then you have somebody with a PhD that's a scientist, or you have the phrase "science says" or "we follow the science" or whatnot. I always say, well, what is the science? Because if you don't do that, then all it is a platitude, but it bears a lot of authority, and most people are not equipped. They don't feel confident enough to challenge the authority. So because it is an authority and it's authoritative, it has power over people.
Well, we saw this absolutely in COVID, right? People standing on a dot in the grocery store because someone told them that they had to stand 6 feet apart. And we didn't do our own homework. We didn't even know where to start. And I think you're right. People don't feel equipped to challenge someone who says, trust the science.
Right. And they don't show the science when they say that. They're trying to use it as a power play to control people.
It works.
So it works. It works very well. You need to do this because the science says it's necessary. Well, nobody's equipped to say, what does the science? Help me to understand the science. Or they're not allowed to challenge it. Most of the time, there's actually no science behind it. It's just a tool to exercise power over people.
And we definitely saw that. And then, it was just recently in the last 6 months or so that Fauci, who in my estimation is a criminal, has come out and said, we actually didn't have there was no reasoning behind the 6-foot rule. They just made it up.
They made it up.
They made it up.
And that's just one example of many.
Yeah. And the masks, same thing. I mean, they made it up. And now we got entire generations of people. I'd put myself in this category. When someone says to me, trust the science, I'm like, no. Well, and I don't even know what science is. So there's been so much damage done. I mean, there was, I think, damage before that too. But I would say COVID probably pushed it right over the top in terms of the damage that's been done to the reputations of scientists and science as a general rule. So where do we go? Where do we go when we're trying to figure out what science actually is?
What a great opportunity, huh?
Yeah.
This authority that had so much power and persuasion over the general public for so long, there's now a nick in the armor. So it's an opportunity for the church to actually address what true science is. And if you look historically, the scientists that we get exposed to when we go through education, even high school, but certainly college, if you're in engineering or science curriculums, you get the names of Johannes Kepler or Isaac Newton or Robert Boyle or Pasteur, Louis Pasteur. Everybody has pasteurized milk named after him.
Yep.
And
I
many
did
others.
my 5th grade science report on Louis Pasteur.
There you
Come
go.
on.
Yeah, Maxwell, James Clerk Maxwell. All of those guys, most of them were in Great Britain. Most of them were in the 1700s, but you could add some other names into the 1800s. What the textbooks don't tell us is they were all believers. They were all Christians. We may not agree with all of their theological nuances or whatnot, but they were believers, and they were driven by the convictions that the Bible was true, and they were called to scientific endeavor, and they were motivated by their convictions that, God created all things. He created the heavens and the earth, and He provisioned His creation for our good and for His glory. And much of that provisioning we could put in the general category of ordering, a mathematical order, a physical order, a chemical order, an optical order. Everything is ordered.
Straight out of Romans. The God's a God of order, the invisible things that we can't see, evidence of His hand.
And it's intelligible, and it's unchanging, it's immutable. We call them laws of nature, which, if you think about it, demands a lawgiver. So that ordering is that mathematical ordering is there, and it's precisely ordered as well. That was a presupposition of these scientists. These scientists who were driven by their faith. I have come to the conclusion that the precision in God's ordering of the universe is infinitely precise. We're just limited by our ability to measure it. And if you look at history, technology advancement is directly proportional to our ability to precisely measure things like distance, like time, like mass. I mean, time, we take the measurement of time for granted now, but GPS and all the smart devices that we have requires that everything talks to each other and everything is synchronized to a few nanoseconds. Otherwise, it wouldn't be possible. Well, that's because we've been able to measure time at that level of precision. So you got the order, you got the precision, and there's a third presupposition that the scientists in those days lived up to or approached their scientific endeavor, and that is called contingency. In other words, this ordering, these laws of nature, the mathematical order that you see is not inherent in creation itself. It's imposed on creation. It's imposed on creation by the lawgiver. And when we talk about God's work of sustainment, His sustaining power,
Yes.
He upholds His creation, and it's attributed to Christ, right, in Hebrews 1 and Colossians 1. That, I think, directly speaks to this idea of contingency. It's not inherent in creation, it's imposed on creation by the sustaining power, the upholding power of God.
I heard a pastor a long time ago talk about, God's sustaining power, right, through Christ, and that if, all that would need to happen for the world to fall apart really would be for God to remove His hand.
Yeah, exactly.
For
right.
God to remove His hand of protection. I mean, we in Him, we live and move and have our being. And if God were determined to say, I'm done with that, all He would have to do is remove His hand, correct?
That's correct, yeah. The creation coheres because of God's sustaining power. It's upheld by His continuous sustaining power.
And so we've had to work pretty hard. I teach on this all the time. I think you were there at one point because I was at your church talking about the history of the education system. And we've worked very diligently in this country to remove God from education, remove Him from science. In the 1800s, certainly in the 1700s, in the late 1700s, secular education would have been inconceivable. It would have been an anathema to these people because to them, God was in everything. And that's why I think so interesting that when you raise, scientists like Isaac Newton and Louis Pasteur, we never hear. I never did, and I went to a Christian school. We never hear these guys were Christians. They believed that there was a creator because having a creator changes everything. If you have a creator,
Absolutely.
It changes the paradigm of everything around you.
And they've left some great testimony. I've got some great quotes of prayers and their commitment to what they saw as their calling. God called them to science, and it was a component, as I said, to subdue the creation that He has given us.
I think, talking to you is so fascinating because of your history and what you've accomplished, what the Lord has allowed you to do, really, with going up into space. But I wonder, and I want to get to all that stuff, but there's a conflict. Christians believe that there's a conflict, right? And you say this conflict between our faith and science is really far more than Darwinism. When we were talking a while ago, you said that Christians have felt sort of ill-equipped to challenge the quote scientists that will secular scientists that have really injected humanism into everything since really the Enlightenment. Can you unpack that a little bit? Because I think you're right. Like, I feel like we're almost afraid as Christians to go into the sciences now from a biblical worldview, from a perspective of someone who believes there's a creator. Why?
Well, when I first became an astronaut in the 90s and started speaking, because we're ambassadors for NASA, so we're out speaking all the time. And when you talk, you get Q&A sessions a lot. So a very common question I would get is, how can you, especially among believers, how can you be a believer and work at NASA? How can you work in the field of science and be a believer? Which reveals the perception of conflict. And that's the common thought is that they're not compatible, that the Christian faith conflicts with science and scientific endeavor. Science, at best, is just outside the sacred. It's in the secular. And I would always say there's absolutely no conflict. Because I got the question early, I've spent decades really studying the answer to the question. And the more I study, the more I learn. So we talked a little bit about the age of science, what I call the age of science, and those scientists that were driven by their faith. And parallel to that, though, there were those that were fighting against the church and the authority of the church. And if we look back at particularly the 1700s, let's consider that era. The church had a lot of authority over the populace, and I'm talking most of this centered in the UK and in England, and then it came across to America. There was this.
They had great political power too.
Yes, yeah, that's right. But there were those, of course, and this started in Genesis 3, right? There were those in culture that hated the church, hated the authority of the church, hated the authority of the clergy specifically. And there was I could go back to, let's see, everybody hears about Charles Darwin. His grandfather was Erasmus Darwin. And Erasmus Darwin actually developed a lot of what became known as the evolutionary theory aspects of that. So it wasn't Charles' original
I've never
work.
even heard of his grandfather.
Yeah, Erasmus Darwin. You can look it up and easy to find. There was a friend of his called, his last name was Hutton, and he was a geologist. And he also hated the institution of the church and the power that it had over the populace. So he hated God. I mean, that's by nature.
It's the Ephesians 6 battle.
Exactly.
Yeah.
He started introducing the idea of long ages of the earth, and also elements of evolution. And again, he's friends with Erasmus Darwin, and he published some work, particularly in introducing the concept of millions of years for the geology that he observed to be able to explain that. So it was very significant in that a generation later, actually more than a generation later, because the year he died, another man was born by the name of Charles Lyell, who was a contemporary of Darwin. And Lyell grew up and he was trained as a lawyer, but then he kind of took on, it was almost like a hobby to him, geology. He was very interested in geology, and Hutton had big influence, was a big influence on him. Charles Lyell was also a friend of Charles Darwin. So they were working together and collaborating. And Lyell is known to have introduced the term or the concept of uniformitarianism, which is basically says, hey, as we see erosion taking place today, it's happened always like that. Basically, it wasn't nothing catastrophic in the past. So if it's always happened like that, taking a grain of sand, and we extrapolate backwards, then you get to even billions of years. Mm-hmm. So he was very influential working with Darwin. They also had another contemporary by the name of Thomas Huxley, and this is all in the UK. Huxley, if you look him up, you'll find one of his nicknames is Darwin's Bulldog. Charles Darwin was actually pretty publicly shy, is my impression. He would not have probably even published his work had it not been for the pressure he was getting from others. So you don't think
the Origin of the Species would have been published had he not been pressured into it?
From my reading, there was a very good chance that he would not have done that, but he was pushed by some of the people around him. Mm-hmm. And Thomas Huxley in particular was one of those guys that really led the effort to take the work of Darwin and get it out there, to use it as a tool. And Huxley even admits in his writing he didn't really have a lot of confidence in the supposed science that supported Darwin's theories. But he saw it as an opportunity to use it as a tool to propagate and to undermine the authority of the church. Now think about it. If in those days the Bible was held in high regard in general so you couldn't publicly attack the Bible and get away with it. Mm-hmm. There would be a reaction to that.
Yeah, there would have been. People would have risen against that.
So the strategy of all of those guys over those generations was to attack the Bible indirectly.
This is the same thing that Orestes Brownson did in his attacking of the parents and the authority over their children as they began to implement secular schools and government education. The very first thing they did was to indirectly, and they wrote about this in their books, right? They said you can't directly attack the clergy, but you could indirectly do it. Right. And so you're seeing the same types of tactics in science as we've seen in education. Right.
And that's propaganda,
yes,
the work of propaganda.
Yeah, amazing.
So that's what happened. If you can, to undermine the Bible indirectly, let's start at the beginning. So if we can undermine the beginning chapters of the Bible, the whole account of creation and the fall and the flood, then we can undermine the authority of Scripture. Now, a lot of Christians will say, well, that's not that critical in terms of our faith. I believe in Christ. I believe in the resurrection. I believe in the virgin birth. I believe in the New Testament. And I believe in the what they would refer to as the history of the Old Testament from the call of Abraham on through the life of the nation of Israel. But it's allegorical in the beginning. Well,
Yeah, if they can make it into a story, a fairy tale, essentially.
Right. And there's different theories, and started incorporating the theories into your understanding. Well, I always challenge people, if you don't believe the first 11 chapters of the Bible, where in the Bible do you begin to believe it?
Yes, this is why Ken Ham calls it the Genesis 1 to 11 attack.
Yeah.
Right,
yeah.
because this is why our defense of Genesis is so essential to the rest of the Christian faith, because if we can tear apart the creation account, well, then why aren't we tearing apart the account of the cross and the resurrection of Jesus and the rest of it? I mean, what you've called, my friend Pastor Phil Harper calls it cut and paste theology.
Yes.
And so we see this attack very early on.
In the whole gospel message, the whole story of redemption and reconciliation falls apart without the fundamental foundations found in specifically Genesis 1, 2, and 3. So it was very successful. I call it the most successful propaganda campaign in modern history.
Wow.
Now, there's another aspect that's, everybody's heard about Darwin, and many people have heard about Huxley and others. There's another couple of names that I'll throw out there. Their last names are Draper and White. They were Americans, and one of them, I forget which one, had immigrated from the UK, but they were both Americans, and they worked in the education system in the Northeast, in the New York area. And they were actually friends of Huxley and a group of philosophers and others that were kind of hung out with Huxley. They had, I think, what they called the X Club or something for a while, where they would meet periodically and talk about these things. But Draper and White were greatly influenced by Huxley and that group over there. And Draper wrote a book called, it was something like The Conflict Between Science and the Church, or Science and Religion, I think it was. The Conflict Between Science and Religion. He wrote a book, and in that book, his premise was there's always been a conflict between science and religion. You have, we've heard this terminology before, you have the regressive force of religion holding back the progressive force of science.
Boy, that's today.
Yeah, but this was in the 1870s, as I recall.
So this is so important, I think, for people to understand that what you're outlining is telling people this didn't just happen recently.
Oh, no.
This has been building. It's just like the education system. I tell people the education system's not broken. It's doing exactly what it was designed to do, and people have been attacking the nature of God and attacking Christians through the education system since the 1700s.
Oh, yes.
And what you're saying is, this is not new. This has been happening for many, many hundreds of years.
In fact, those two battles, if you will, are related, very much related.
Yes.
Yeah, there's a common set to them. But Draper published his book, and it was a very popular book. White, about a decade later or so, they were friends. He was also working on a similar work, and he published a 2-volume set called The Warfare. He used the word warfare, so he escalated. What's the word I'm looking for? He made it even more intense. The warfare between science and Christendom. A big 2-volume set, and he just had one example after another throughout history, how the progressive force of science was held back by the regressive force of religion. White was also the founding president of Cornell University. He and the namesake Cornell founded the university with the premise that the conviction that the education there at Cornell, and science in particular, would be conducted without the restraints of religion. Both of the works from Draper and White were academic works, so they were like academic research, the history of science. Within a decade or two, the academic world in general dismissed both their works as fabrications. They had taken a few facts and they had made up the rest. So they were fabrications they weren't true history.
So academia is coming in and fact-checking these guys from Cornell, and they're saying, nah, something's off.
Right, yeah. This conflict thesis is a lie, basically, is what they said. This is bad history. It's fabricated. But White, in particular, was a very popular, sought-after public speaker, and he was up and down the East Coast during those years to speak on the topic. So the idea of the conflict was firmly planted in the, no pun intended.
I love that.
In the public mind, and it exists to today. And for your listeners, I would encourage them to look up a book. It's called, I don't remember the author's names. It's written by 2 British authors, but Of Popes and Unicorns. Of Popes and Unicorns. And there's a little satire in the title.
We'll take note of that. We'll put it in mentions today. Yeah.
And it was published, I think, about 2 years ago. And it chronicles the whole story of Draper and White. And it's fascinating.
Well, it's so interesting, even the terminology, right? So we hear all the time, Christians are attacked for being regressive. You guys it's like the Handmaid's Tale, right? You want to take us back to the 1600s, back into the dark ages, whereas science is progressive. Christianity is regressive. And so we're still seeing this sort of conflict theory, even though we may not know it by that name. I think most of the people who are listening to this broadcast today are going to be like, oh, hey, yeah, that's how I felt as the only Christian in my biology class in the university or whatever. I was this backward, upside down, idiot because I believe that there was a creator. And I was told, you're holding back true science because you believe in fairy tales. That's essentially what these guys are saying, right?
Right. Oh, yeah, yeah. And without substance, without backing it up, without actually engaging in
Which
the argument.
Which is so fascinating, yeah.
Words have a lot of power, and you just said one that had a lot of power, Dark Ages. That's referring to medieval time frame, the medieval age, which actually there was a lot of science conducted in that time in monasteries and whatnot. So a lot of advances. It was the term Dark Ages, in terms of applying it to how it's normally understood today, is that's when the church kind of regressed or caused a regression in progress, is not true. In fact, the term Dark Ages was applied, I want to say, in the late 1800s or early 1900s for the first time because of that message, that false message. So it's a term of propaganda.
Interesting.
Enlightenment is the same thing. Enlightenment has a positive connotation.
Yeah, so you're trying to pit these two against each other. This was the Dark Ages. You guys are so stupid you couldn't find your way out of a paper sack.
Exactly.
And now we have these amazing scientists who've come in, and now we see the light.
And that word was applied much later than the time period it's referring to. So and you see that in the power of words. You look at the history of marketing. That would be another rabbit trail. But
propaganda.
It uses what we would call propaganda. It uses the power of words to convince people to whatever you're selling, whether it's ideas or material or whatnot, for them to buy it. So many examples of that. Actually, the scientists that we talked about before that were believers, that period of time that they lived in is known as the age of science. But in recent times, and I think this was also in the 20th century, it was applied, another term is applied to that period, the scientific revolution. So think about the difference of the meaning there. The term revolution has a connotation of throwing off something to go to something completely new. So it's
the
applied.
American Revolution.
It's applied consistent with this conflict thesis that we're going to throw off the shackles of religion so that we can progress in science.
Wow.
Words are very powerful.
Yeah, and we see the devastating result that this has had because, as you pointed out earlier, really, I think most Christians, and I would say this is absolutely true of almost all the pastors, who won't ever dive into these topics because the church is really ill-equipped to answer. They feel like they're ill-equipped to answer these arguments that have come since the Enlightenment. And so now we find ourselves with a church that's really largely acquiesced to it. So we've said, oh, hey, you do you. Old earth, young earth, doesn't matter. We're talking about the age of the earth, and people they don't even want to engage the argument because they think they can't make it. I think this is true for a lot of parents that are trying to educate their children right now. And so what is your answer to that? Because if we don't engage in the conversation, this is where theistic evolution came from, right? So we've got Christians. I mean, I have some friends who would call themselves theistic evolutionists. And again, I think it goes back to, it's almost like an embarrassment. I'm going to throw something out at you. This is interesting. So I'm on an airplane a long time ago. And, as often happens to me, the Lord's been doing a sanctifying work in my life through airline travel. And I do it a lot. And a gentleman next to me, I can't even remember how it came up, but he finds out that I'm homeschooling and that I have 7 children. He just cannot believe it. And he's just, sitting there and like he's looking at a unicorn, right? Here's this mom who has 7 children and she's homeschooling them. And he said, you probably call yourself, you probably believe in that somebody created the world, right? You don't think, you're not an atheist. And I said, absolutely not. I think I have a creator. He goes, well, I just think that's so weird. And I said, well, I believe weirder things than that. I believe a snake spoke to a woman in a garden, right? And his head just explodes. But I think I'm not ashamed. I'm not ashamed of the gospel because I know it's the power of Christ. It's the power of God to redeem everything that it touches, that the gospel is powerful. But I think we've lost that in our modern culture, and we are embarrassed. We are ashamed, right? We are ashamed to say, no, God said, I made the world in 7 days, and he laid it out pretty quick, it's pretty methodically laid out. We know when the birds were created. We know when the fish were created. We know God said, let there be light, and there was light. But it's rare to find someone like Ken Ham now, or someone like yourself, who is really hip deep into these topics, that isn't ashamed of the basic message of the Word of God, because God's laid it out for us. Do you remember in the 70s, you probably do, that there was a movement, I want to say it was probably 1976, 77, somewhere in there, and people in evangelical churches had these buttons and it said, I believe it, God said it, I believe it, and that settles it. Do you remember that movement?
Oh, yeah. Bumper stickers, too.
Yeah, bumper stickers. Part of me just thinks we need to get back to that because we've almost moved so far away, it's unrecognizable.
Well, let's not go there. I'll pick on you there a little bit.
Pick on me. I like
because that God said it, I believe it, that settles it, is a subjective kind of way. Because I believe it, it's settled. That's not true, though.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah. God said it. That settles it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. It doesn't matter what I believe.
Right.
Got it. Okay. I see. Yeah. So good thing I threw that button away. I'm glad it's gone. I'll never put that on again. Thank you, Jeff.
Right. Yeah.
But I think it goes to the deeper point, right? That we are kind of ashamed.
Exactly. Yeah. And we need to dig into the Scripture. We need to understand the Scripture. We don't have to be intimidated by this. We just need to do the work to get the answer and challenge the other side. Challenge them to show me the science.
Which they can't.
There's no science to be had.
Yeah.
There's no science that supports evolution, for example. There's nothing there. And I've been looking for it for decades.
It takes an awful lot of faith to be an evolutionist.
Yeah, you're trusting propagandists, really.
Yeah.
You're just, a lot of people, even scientists, if you really have a conversation with them that are committed atheists, that are committed to this, they will finally admit that they don't have the science to support what they believe.
Well,
it's been passed on.
If they did, we'd have seen it by now.
Sure, of course.
If they did, we'd have seen the evolution, right? And instead, we're still talking in species, or as the Bible calls them, we're dealing in kinds, which is exactly what God said in His Word. It's amazing.
Now, I will say there are a lot of scientists out there that are believers. Many of them, they just don't get the voice. The voice isn't carried through the media or through, we don't learn about them, but they're out there. And now with all the social media and the podcast and other means that people, more of them are being heard and they're being found.
What do you say to parents? There are a lot of parents listening to this today who I would say, and I maybe put myself in this category, not a trained scientist, I'm a writer. And I would say a lot of us feel ill-equipped to prepare our children to defend their faith in this arena, and to to be able to give them, obviously there's really great materials, right? We've got our home library is filled with things from Answers in Genesis, and they're wonderful places. But what's your encouragement to parents who are raising their children in an environment that's very hostile toward the things of God? Although I do think, because of what you said a while ago, this chink in the armor, it's definitely there. I mean, this is an incredible time to be an ambassador for the Lord. But what are some places that parents how do we start to equip our children to defend their faith, so that when they go off to a secular university and these ideas are challenged, or even to, but Christian universities, I would say upwards of 80%. I mean, this is I know it's a big number, but I think it's true based on what I've seen. I'd say upwards of 80% of universities that claim to be Christian don't hold to a basic Christian theology anymore, the tenets of the Christian faith, and they're arguing for theistic evolution. So how do we, and then you send your kid to this Christian university and you think, we're good. And their kid comes back and they're deconstructing their faith. And, so it's a big mountain that these parents have to climb. And a lot of them don't feel equipped to climb it. How do we climb it?
Well, everybody's got their own circumstances. For most people, I would not recommend staying, or try to consider an alternative to public school. And it doesn't mean
jumping on my bandwagon right there.
It doesn't mean all Christian schools are faithful either. So it is hard, and we all know that the homeschoolers just exploded, especially with COVID. And some of the political stuff that was going on, the social justice movement and the LGBT
Black
movements
Lives
and whatnot.
Matter, yeah.
And that's still out there.
Yep.
So there's a lot of danger in most public schools. Hopefully there's a little bit of a slowing to that, but I don't think we'll be able to reverse it. And the same is true with universities. There's a lot of things you could. That's another rabbit trail to talk about universities. But there's very few, as you acknowledge, universities that are very, very faithful to the Scripture. One that comes to mind, top of my list, is the Masters University in California. They are very faithful, and that would be, in the top of my list of recommendations for folks to consider. But there's also another regarding universities. Most of them are a place of indoctrination and propaganda, and not liberal education in the classic use of the term.
Well,
liberal.
People need to understand, when you say a liberal arts education, it isn't what most people think that it is.
Right, it's not the political today's liberal. So it's a tough world. There are resources out there. You mentioned Answers in Genesis. I would also recommend the Institute of Creation Research. They have a lot of material out there. There's David Reeves in Dixon, Tennessee. He's got there's a museum there called the Wonders in Science Center. And he's got a 24-hour-a-day internet TV. It's called Genesis, GSN, I think, Genesis Science Network. There's a lot of material there. So there are resources out there, but you got to go find them.
So a couple things I want to tackle with you briefly. The first one is the issue of young Earth. How important is it that we hold to a young? I understand it's not a salvation issue, so I'm not gonna part ways with a brother or sister in Christ over it. But how important, in your estimation, is it that we hold to a young Earth position on creation?
I think it's very important, because we need to challenge ourselves. If we confess that the Word of God is the truth, we need to be faithful in how we approach it. And that includes the first 11 chapters. And as we've been talking about some of the history, that the 11 chapters were undermined in their authority historically through what is clearly, if you look at the details, what clearly is a propaganda campaign. There was no reason to bring doubt, or to cause doubt, or to begin to doubt the literal writings, account of creation given in Genesis 1 and 2, and then even the flood. Collectively, 1 through 11. There's no reason to doubt it when you look at
very
that.
Very diabolical, very calculated.
Yes, yeah. And where did it start? It started in Genesis 3. Did God actually say? That's where it started. that undermines or that defines the battle since then, the spiritual battle. So I think it's very important, because I've seen over and over again where, especially young people, when they grow up and they are not taught and don't become convicted that the entire Bible is true, to include the first chapters of the Bible, it sets them up for their faith later to be shipwrecked. Mm-hmm. And we've seen that over and over again, especially late teen, early 20 time frame of life. So I think it's very important, and there's absolutely no reason to let it go, to throw it away.
So the other question I have, and this is something I thought, you and I were talking about this before we started recording today, is the rise of artificial intelligence, right? Mm-hmm. Everyone's talking about it. I just updated my phone this morning, and there's a whole new AI on it. Mm-hmm. And, I mean, we're making images. We're doing all kinds of things. Should people be afraid of AI?
Well, that question could be applied any time in history with the growth of technology, right? Every time something new comes up, it's so should we be afraid of this? And you have this debate that goes on or whatnot. Technology it's a product of the scientific ordering of creation and mankind's God-given ability, bearing the image of the Creator, to be creative and to go search it out, explore, discover, experiment, do scientific experiments. Oh, what if I apply some heat to this? Oh, I get a new substance. Oh, it might be useful for something. And oh, by the way, I did this over here. What if I combine the two together? That's the history of technology. And every time we come up with something new that's useful, we can attribute that to be for progress. AI is the same way. But we also have to remember Genesis 3. It's a fallen world. So although we have that provision in God's creation and we have God-given ability to develop it or whatnot, it can be used for good and it can be used for evil. And that's true with AI as well. I think this is not new. There's nothing new under the sun. I think historically, when new technologies have just exploded or come to be and the public mind became aware of it, there's fear there. There's opportunity in the minds of some, and it's seen positively, but then there's fear in the minds of others. So it's the same dynamic over and over again.
So when people are talking about, I read an article written from a Christian perspective called The Rise of AI, and it was all about, robots and how, it's going to turn into it like a movie. It's a sci-fi movie. And my first thought was God didn't give us a spirit of fear. Whenever I see fear in the front, I mean, we saw this in COVID, right? Fear was the spirit, which the Bible calls it a spirit. God didn't give us a spirit of fear, right? Mm-hmm. But fear was the prevailing motivator behind us shuttering our churches, behind all of the crazy, ridiculous mandates and all the things that happened. And my thought is, if fear becomes the prevailing motivator behind how Christians respond to AI, then we do three things. And this is what Paul said to Timothy, right? When you give into the spirit of fear, you lose your love, mm-hmm. you lose your power, mm-hmm. and you lose your soundness mm-hmm. of mind. Mm-hmm. And it seems to me that we're at risk for that right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I don't fear AI. In fact, I'm already using it in small ways, mm-hmm. and I'm trying.
Just don't use it to write a book. You'll get in trouble.
Oh yeah, no, not. But it's a great research tool. It can save a lot of time. It's got a lot of applications. I'm working with a startup company right now. We're trying to. I guess in the general Internet of Things, smart city kind of blanket of ideas or whatnot that will incorporate AI, and we're utilizing that. Now, in this company, we're believers, so we're going to seek to use it for good, and mm-hmm. it's going to be ethical use of it and appropriate use for it. Mm-hmm. But technology can be used for good. It can be used for evil.
Yeah. Just like anything.
Yeah,
education
like
can be used for good, can be used for sex, can be used for good, can be used for evil. I mean, I think, Christians need to not be afraid. We need to be asking God, right, what do you want us to do? I love so much that you have so much hope because of Christ. Our hope isn't in this world. It's not found in the things that are of this world. Right. A long time ago, I talked to my friend Dave Amador, and we were talking about cell phones, and people were afraid of cell phones and the radiation that comes off of them, and we're all going to get brain cancer. And And he said, well, if you actually measure, so he started talking to me about, cell phones, and we talk about microwaves and all these things. He said, Christians need to stop living in fear. Talk to me a little bit about the future of NASA. You said that people have been like, how could you be a Christian and work for NASA? And then you see, idiots like Jeff Bezos and Blue Origin, and we're launching Katy Perry up to so-called space. I think that space exploration is getting got some wind at their back right now, because President Trump's in the White House, and he is shining a new light on space exploration. And there's an inherent, people, always hearing about the conflict between the United States and Russia. We certainly see the conflict with Russia and Ukraine, and the president talking to the president of Ukraine, and now Putin and all the things. But you say the space has been sort of this unifier, maybe the only one that's left, between the United States and Russia.
Yeah, my entire career at NASA was dedicated to the International Space Station, and my 4 space flights were all...
You're fluent in Russian, yeah?
Nizhny Novgorod, по-русски, наша работа.
I could just listen to it all day long. What did you just say?
I just said it's necessary to speak Russian in our work. Yeah, we all learn Russian, and I say we, the Americans, the Japanese, the Europeans, and the Canadians that are partners in the International Space Station all learn Russian, and the Russian cosmonauts all learn English. And we use what we call Runglish on board. But it is an International Space Station. Those are the principal partners, the core partners. The partnership was established in 1992 or 3, I think it was 3. We launched the first element in 1998. My first flight was in 2000 on the space shuttle, but it was dedicated to a lot of Russian work. So I spent a lot of time in Russia preparing for that flight. And then later, my next 3 flights I launched on a Russian Soyuz from Kazakhstan. So Star City, or the Gagarin Cosmonaut Training Center outside of Star City, named after Yuri Gagarin, first man in space, was my second home for many years through the 2000s and into the teens. And they're good partners. And our partnership has gotten stronger over the years, even with the issues with Georgia and Crimea and now the broader war in Ukraine. The partnership between the 2 programs has been strong because it's based on relationships, and we trust each other. We're working within the constraints of the political circumstances. We're the only positive engagement left. But the partnership has been there since 1993, as I said, and we are continuing on the space station. We're still launching an American on every Russian Soyuz twice a year. We're launching a Russian on every SpaceX capsule that goes to the space station twice a year.
We don't hear about that stuff in the news.
No, the news chooses what they want to cover. They don't highlight much of what actually goes on, but it's been routine. We've had continuous human presence in space, at a minimum 1 American and 1 Russian in space at all times since the fall of 2000.
Wow, okay.
So we're going on 25 years of continuous human presence under the context of the International Space Station. The current plans are to fly it till at least 2030, and I predicted very likely that we'll even go beyond that. We've continued to extend it 2 to 4 years at a time, and that's occurred throughout history. The original lifetime was out to 2015. So
beyond that already.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I always think it's such a privilege that I get to talk to you, because you're one of just a handful of people that's actually been to space. And have you done a spacewalk? What is that like, Jeff? I can't even imagine it. What's it like to walk in space, and how many times have you done it?
I've done 5 spacewalks. And it is the highlight of the experience. I would say it's the hardest thing we do physically and mentally. Physically, because you're working in this big, bulky suit that's pressurized. So every motion of your hand or your arm or fingers takes some effort. So you come in with exhausted, at least 4 arms and hands after the duration of a spacewalk, which lasts typically 6.5, 7 hours. So, and it takes 5 hours or so to get ready to go out the door. So it's a long day.
What is that like? So what are they doing in those hours
Well,
to get you ready?
we're getting in the suit, which is a systematic kind of process to go through. You get the suit sealed up and checked out, and then you have to wash the nitrogen out of your blood by breathing 100% oxygen before you go down to a lower pressure. Because inside the space station, we're breathing an atmosphere very similar to what we're breathing right now. Mostly nitrogen and oxygen at 14.7 pounds per square inch, so 1 atmosphere. But when we go outside, we go out at a little over 4 pounds per square inch of 100% oxygen. Lots of reasons for that, but there's a process to get there. So you have to wash the nitrogen out of your bloodstream over time, and then have the suit get ready, get the tools ready, and then go through the process, getting in the airlock and slowly closing the hatches inside the airlock, and then slowly letting the air out of the airlock until you get to a vacuum, and then you can open up the outside door and go outside. And you're tethered 100% of the time. Every tool, every piece of equipment is tethered 100% of the time.
So it's not like the movies where you're going to just...
You're not going to go fly around.
You're not going to go... They're not going to lose you.
Right. We're tethered so we don't get lost because, there's no way to get back.
That's terrifying. Like I'm picturing something out of a movie. You know, you're in this airlock and you can hear it as it seals shut and as it vacuum seals and all that stuff.
Oh, yeah.
Is it scary?
Well, if it's scary to you, you're probably in the wrong business. If people ask me, do you ever get claustrophobic? Well, if you suffer from claustrophobia, you're probably in the wrong. You missed your calling. Mm-hmm. So no, but you're focused. It's a very systematic process. Speaking of sounds and whatnot, everything sounds space age, in a spacewalk. Anna Marie, my wife, she did not like watching the spacewalk because of that. It spooked her. She would even come out once in a while at the swimming pool where we do the training. Very large pool. We have a full-scale mock-up of the space station on the bottom. But as they're suiting us up, when they put the helmet over my head, it just caused her to all kinds of anxiety. Mm-hmm. So she didn't like that either.
I mean, I have anxiety, and I'm not married to you, and I've got anxiety over the whole thing. I can only imagine.
But I called it the ultimate skydive. To go outside this orbiting outpost that we call the International Space Station, which is bigger than a football field, and now you're just, we call it a spacewalk, but it's really a hand-over-hand crawl in a weightless environment, extreme temperatures. But just in the shadows, it can be minus 170 degrees. In the sun, materials can get up to several hundred degrees. But the suit protects us from that. But you respect the environment very much. You're focused. It's the 7 hours is highly choreographed.
And what are you doing?
Well, we assembled the space station. We had when we bring a module up, we could attach the module remotely with robotic arms. But then we had to go outside and connect up power and data, thermal control systems, and other things. We also have deployed experiments outside and then gone outside to retrieve them after a period of time. Or we do maintenance.
How many of you at a time? Two
of us at a time. And to date, I want to say we've done 275 plus or minus spacewalks in the life of the space station. So spacewalks were required to put it together.
Has there ever been an accident?
No, we've had some close calls, some serious close calls. We had a near drowning one time because it was a failure inside with one of the systems in the spacesuit where the ventilation loop, which is blowing oxygen from behind our head over our face, fresh oxygen, then it circulates through the suit. There had been a failure in the system in the suit where water was injected into it. So now this water bubble start building up inside, and the crew member didn't even realize it at first. And it's hard to describe and to understand a weightless environment, but the way water behaves, it can kind of sneak up on you. But if it gets on your face, you have no way to clear your face. So it got to the point. How does he
not panic?
Well, it got to the point where he got blinded by the water, and then his communication went out because we have a microphone, right? And his crewmate by this time knew of an emergency had been declared, and his crewmate got to him, and they were just like doing hand grips to each other. Yeah, I hear you. I acknowledge you. I'm still alive or whatnot. And his crewmate led him back to the airlock and got him inside. Did a very rapid repressurization.
That takes a minute, right? The repressurization.
It takes lots of minutes.
Yeah.
So you went in. They got in through the process, got the airlock closed up, and then repressurized. Got him inside where the rest of the crew was, and got the helmet off in a hurry, and he was fine, thank God. But that was probably our major close call.
Yeah, I mean I'm sitting here listening to you, and I'm just on the edge of my seat. Like that's terrifying. I mean, what you're doing is extraordinary work, but it's also dangerous.
Oh yeah, it's got risk all along. I mean, riding a rocket is not trivial.
Okay, so what's that like? So when we were sitting outside of the studio a while ago, you were like, we should talk about what it's like to ride a rocket and then return to Earth, because
yeah, no, it's amazing. I mean, it takes a lot of energy to get, and just to give your listeners an idea, you're sitting on the launch pad, let's say the space shuttle, because it was much bigger than a Soyuz. It weighed about 4 million pounds.
When you say Soyuz,
Russian Soyuz rocket. I launched 3 times on a Russian Soyuz rocket. So that's been flying since the first Soyuz flew in 1967. So it's a workhorse. And it's used to take a crew of 3 to orbit to the space station, and then we return to Earth in that spacecraft. It weighs on the order of, if I remember right, 600,000 pounds, and produces almost 1 million pounds at liftoff of thrust.
Whoa.
Space shuttle weighed 4 million pounds on the launch pad and produced 7.5 million pounds of thrust. It had a different mission. It carried 40,000 pounds of payload plus a crew of 7. Soyuz has crew of 3 plus a few hundred pounds of payload. But it's the same principle,
almost like a ferry.
Same physics.
Yeah.
So you go through the countdown, and we strap in about 2.5 hours before liftoff. And people ask me, "Are you nervous?" And I said, "No, you're very relaxed when you're inside." In fact, I took a nap every countdown because there's a period of time where once you get settled and you get everything checked out, then you got about an hour to wait until things get busy again before liftoff. So I just would take a nap.
So you were really relaxed.
Yeah.
And you prepare for years for this.
Yeah. But then you get to the close countdown, 3, 2, 1, and actually 6 seconds prior, the engines, you feel them start lighting up, and the computers are checking them out, checking out all the systems. And then at T0, we call it, they're at full throttle, and you got liftoff. And you have a lot of power pushing you off the launch, but you feel the power, feel the energy.
It pushes you back, I would imagine.
Yeah, you're already on your back in the seat, but you feel the power and the shaking initially, but then the G's start building up as you go up. As you burn off the fuel, it gets lighter. The acceleration increases, and you get up to 3 Gs, 3 times the force of gravity in the space shuttle, 4 times the force of gravity in the Soyuz. You go through the staging of the different stages of the rocket, and for the space shuttle, it was the solid rocket boosters. After they were jettisoned, after 2 minutes, we call it the electric ride. It was very smooth. The Soyuz was not as violent as the solid rocket booster, but wasn't as smooth as the second stage of the space shuttle. But the whole ascent from liftoff to getting to orbit is less than 9 minutes. 8 minutes and 53 seconds.
How many miles per hour are you traveling?
And after that time, after accelerating that entire time, you're going 17,500 miles an hour.
That is insane.
Which is orbital velocity, orbiting the Earth every 90 minutes. And back to the previous topic, it's precisely that and predictably that, and we planned for that. We because of the mathematical ordering
Immutable.
of God's work of creation.
Yeah.
But 17,500 miles an hour, every 90 minutes orbiting the Earth, 16 times a day, sunrise, sunset, sunrise, sunset.
So you're just constantly seeing this out your window. Sunrise, sunset.
Yeah, every 45 minutes on average. The days are usually longer they're always longer than the nights because...
Is it disorienting?
Well, there's an adaptation period that everybody goes through on their first flight. After the first flight, I found it's like riding a bicycle. It takes... It takes a few days for a lot of people to get over what I would call, like at least the basic symptoms of a seasickness kind of thing. We call it space adaptation syndrome, and some people would get violently ill in the first 24 hours or so. But thankfully, I didn't get ill. But I did lose my appetite, and I was very conservative for a few days. But then you adapt. But it really takes about, I was in orbit over my career with 56, I think, different individuals. So either on my crew or crews we were replacing or crews that replaced us or visiting space shuttle crews. So that's a lot of folks. So I observed a lot of folks on their first flight. And of course I had my first flight. It takes about 6 weeks or so for people to really fully adapt to operating in zero G, in weightless environment. On the ground here, we have the floor and the ceiling, and we work largely in 2 dimensions. A little bit of vertical up and down or whatnot, but largely in 2 dimensions. In 6 weeks of adaptation, then you get very comfortable calling anything the floor. That the floor, that the floor, that the floor. And you move across a module. It would be like floating across this room and going up to the corner of the ceiling there. And as I go, I flip my body so that I land, in a certain orientation on the ceiling, and then just do my work. And it's normal. But it takes about 6 weeks to get there.
I think about, this is something that's sort of interesting to me. You're up there and you're, like you said, you're certain orientations so that you land, but your feet are on what we would consider the ceiling. So we consider you to be sort of upside down. And you can't hang out upside down here because all the blood goes to your head. Right. And it's not like that out there? Well,
in some sense, you have this feeling the blood going to your head continually.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Okay.
Yeah, because you no longer have gravity pulling it down when you first get there. So that takes a while to adapt to. But it's an amazing experience. It's just incredible. A lot of aspects to it. A lot of fun you can have. You can take some water and you can make little water bubbles and you can blow them around or whatnot. And you do all kinds of things. Do somersaults forever.
It's so hard to imagine. I do think that the story that you just shared about that man who almost drowned in his suit, I don't know why they didn't make a movie about that. That's amazing. So when you're ready to come back, what's that like? Because I would imagine there's a fair amount of prep that goes into that, right? And now you're
yes, and that's as
not like the Blue Origin.
No, give them credit. There's risk there too.
Oh yes.
Yeah, it's a short little flight, little thrill-seeking flight, I suppose.
Yeah.
It doesn't go to orbit. Going to orbit is completely different.
Where did it go?
It just goes up, and they kind of go up until it's like if you throw a ball in the air. It slows down, stops, and then comes down. If you were to ride that ball, you would feel like zero gravity. So it launches up with a velocity. It's gonna loft high into the bottom edge of what we would call space, and then just fall back down. And then the engine starts up again on the descent and lands them safely. It's not going to orbit. Going to orbit, you have to get a velocity, completely different.
Well, I would imagine you need training. You can't just, right?
Yeah, I trained for almost 4 years for my first 6-month flight.
Yeah.
But that was space station, all the details of that, the Soyuz getting there and getting home, doing spacewalks, and I did spacewalks in both the U.S. and the Russian suits. So. And then all the science experiments that we did, all the emergencies that we could possibly face, we trained. We spend majority of our time training for things that would go wrong.
I would think so. Yeah.
So
very little room for error.
Yeah. So you have to be able to respond, per your training. You don't have time to think about something when something goes wrong. You just have to be able to respond, and training prepares you for that. Before we get to entry, though, I want to highlight another thing. It is an amazing vantage point to view the Earth.
You took pictures.
I took almost 500,000 pictures, is what they say. So I was motivated to capture the vantage point, to be able to bring it back and show it so others can vicariously experience that vantage point. So, and the earth is amazing. And when we look at it through the biblical lens and what we know of God's work of creation, it becomes even more amazing. So people ask me all the time, did going to space change my faith? Or do I know God better? And my short answer is no, because my faith comes through his special revelation of the Word of God. But certainly the experience deepened and enhanced and gave profound illustrations to the truth that we find in Scripture.
Amazing.
So yeah,
So you've published a book with your pictures in it. I have it sitting on my coffee table.
Yeah, it's called The Work of His Hands. I drew that line out of Psalm 111. By the way, Psalm 111, verse 2 says, "Great are the works of the Lord, studied by all who delight in them." And when I think about the works of the Lord, I think of works of creation, works of sustaining his creation, works of provisioning his creation, works of providence and the details of our lives, each of us individually, personally.
And to give him glory.
And all of that fully understood through his work of redemption in Christ. So that, and it says, great are the works of the Lord, studied by all who delight in them. And I remind people all the time, it's not a command to study his works. It's not a command to delight in them. They are characterized as studied works for the believer. And the believer is a delighting believer in that study. So it's characterizing us. It's not commanding us to do it. It's telling us how we ought to be if we're believers in God and seek to know him through his revelation.
It's the same in the Psalms. We're supposed to delight in the law of the Lord.
Exactly. Right? Yes. So returning to Earth is just as challenging and risky as getting there to orbit. You're going 17,500 miles an hour. We have a small engine on board for orbital maneuvers, but it's not like the rocket that launched us there. But somehow we have to get rid of all that energy. You know, it's like you're going in your car 100 miles an hour, and you got a corner coming up, or you got a cliff coming up, or a truck parked in the middle of the road. You got to stop. So you got to get rid of the energy. Well, you have to start getting rid of it early to be able to stop in time. So we're going that velocity, and how we decelerate, how we lose that energy is through the friction of flying through the atmosphere. Well, when you're in orbit, to fly through the atmosphere, all you have to do is slow down just a little bit, and now the arc of the orbit will go down and hit the upper part of the atmosphere. As soon as you hit the upper part of the atmosphere, friction builds up and it slows you down more, and that you go deeper into the atmosphere, continue to get more friction, more deceleration, slows you down more. And that entry into the atmosphere takes 10 or 12 minutes. It builds up to another 4 Gs, 4 times the force of gravity. So if I weigh 200 pounds, it feel like 800 pounds. And you're getting hot, and the heat builds up so that you initially see a glow out the window, a faint glow, and then it gets brighter and brighter and brighter until it's a bright orange, and you realize you're in a fireball. As you decelerate and dispense all that energy. To give your listeners another idea of scale, if we're going to land a Soyuz in Kazakhstan in Central Asia, we fire that engine going backwards to slow us down just a little bit, and it's 128 meters per second. So I'll let your reader or your listeners do the math. It's a very small change to the velocity, but we fire the engine over the southern tip of South America, and then fly over the Atlantic, fly over the continent of Africa, across the eastern end of the Mediterranean Sea before we hit the atmosphere. And now we're slowing down to land in Kazakhstan. So it's,
you started that a long time ago, distance-wise, for sure.
Yes.
It's just, I think, looking out your window and seeing that fire, because
it's pretty exciting.
I mean, that has got to be, that doesn't scare you, dude?
No, it was just another exciting
Does it
chapter
scare
of it.
your wife?
That's another endurance. Anna Marie endured a long period of time of some level of stress, right?
Yes.
A big burst of emotional stress on launch, watching me launch, but then a lesser over 6 months integrated over a long period of time. She's a hero in this story. And the wives of the astronauts, or the spouses of the astronauts, are heroes, just because I'll never fully comprehend what she went through on the ground over that 6 months. And then you get to entry day, and you, in the back of your mind, you go through that 6 months, and you. I didn't consciously think about it, but afterwards I kind of thought through a little bit more. In the back of your mind, there's kind of this thing, I hope the parachute opens at the very end of this time. Yes. Yeah. Because after you go through that fireball, then you get to finally get to subsonic speed. Now you hear the wind outside. You realize you have another sensation, I guess, from the sound. And then there's a big
you
explosive
haven't heard anything
force.
To this point?
It's fairly quiet because you're supersonic, going very fast. I think it has to do with the speeds and the fact that you're insulated from the sound due to shock waves outside. But as soon as you go to subsonic, I know my experience 3 times, you hear this rushing wind for a few seconds, and then the parachute opening sequence begins through explosion sounds of pyrotechnics, blowing the door off, releasing the drogue chute, riding that for 20 seconds, and then it gets released and the main chute comes out with another explosion, then you get the opening shock. That whole thing lasts about 20, 25 seconds, that sequence, and it's the longest 25 seconds in your life. And then once the main chute opens up, you get the opening shock, then we drift down to the ground over 10 or 12 minutes or so. And in my experience, we had communication right after parachute opening with a search and rescue airplane that was there at the target site, and they spotted us, so they flew around us all the way down, and then we had helicopters landing within a minute or so of touching down on the ground. These are Russian search and rescue forces that we deploy for every landing.
Wow.
So yeah, and when you hit the ground, it's like going through a car wreck.
I cannot imagine.
And then you end up hanging in your street. And now after 6 months of being weightless, now you got this relentless force of gravity pulling you down.
Yes.
It takes effort just to pick up your arm, whatnot, so that now you're adapting to that.
Mm-hmm.
But you have this overwhelming feeling when the motion stops is we're home. Even though it's in the middle of nowhere halfway around the world.
Mm-hmm.
You're back on the planet.
Yeah. I can only imagine how Anne Marie would feel watching you, right? Because we all watch as these spacecraft returns to the Earth, and everyone kind of holds their breath. But I can't imagine how she's feeling.
Yeah,
like you're her entire world, like in that moment.
Yeah.
Did you get much? I'm sure you did. Opportunity to talk with her while you're up there.
Oh, we talked every day. Twice a day. I would try to call her when we work on Greenwich Mean Time, the time in England, Greenwich, England, and so we're typically 6 hours ahead of her. So by my noon time or so, I would call her, and we'd have a short chat typically, and then when I was going to bed, say at 10 o'clock my time at night, I'd give her another call, and sometimes in between. So yeah, that was our routine, and the calls were often very short because I didn't have a lot of time, but I wanted to touch base. And then later we had near real-time email, and once a week, usually on a Sunday afternoon, we would have a two-way video conference as well, before Zoom and all that, but it was a different video conference.
In retrospect, and when you look back, how would you say that affected like your marriage? Do you feel like it just sort of deepens your?
Oh yeah, I think so. Yeah,
I would think
definitely.
So.
Yeah, it was. We came to faith when we were 30 years old, before NASA. So we had rebuilt our marriage relationship and all of the philosophy of life and everything on our faith. So going to space, we were grounded in our faith. So if you were to ask her the question, it would be prayer and, the fellowship of the believers and trust in the Lord.
That's amazing. Jeff Williams, you're an amazing human being, and I just feel so honored that you live so close that you can come and talk to us about about your experiences that the Lord's really allowed you to have, and encourage people that they really can trust the Bible, that we can trust God's word, and we should be able to defend it again. I think really quickly before we go, one of the things that was sort of on my heart to ask you is, where do you see the conversation that Christians are having? Do you feel encouraged by the way that you see people engaging around conversations of science and faith, Or do you feel like we're still continuing to lose ground?
Oh, no, I'm very encouraged.
I
I
am
think
too.
there's a lot going on. And I think the internet and social media and whatnot have been able to connect people to resources to get them to spend a little time considering these things. Yeah, no, I'm very encouraged.
Yeah, and I think really so much of what I hear you saying is just a call to the church. It's a clarion call, really, to the church. Come back to a biblical worldview of creation, because it matters. Having a creator changes everything.
Absolutely.
Jeff Williams, you're a national treasure, and I mean it from the bottom of my heart. Thank you for coming on the show today. If people
Thank
want to
you.
reach out to you, if they're interested in having you come and speak, because you do a fair amount of that to churches, that kind of thing, I'm going to have them go ahead and reach out to me if that's all right with you.
Sure.
And so if you guys are interested in bringing Jeff to speak at your event, you can contact me the way that you guys always do it, just HeidiSt.John.com/Mailbox Monday, and include your contact information, and I will forward that information to my friend Jeff Williams. Jeff, thank you for being here today, for just allowing your life to speak so beautifully.
Thank you, Heidi.
To the creation account and to what God is, and to science. Just thank you. It's just been a joy to have you.
Praise God.
All right, you guys, I hope this has been an encouragement for you. Thank you for hanging in there with me. As you can tell, I am struggling with my voice. And so this is my busy season. As you guys know, I'm on the road every weekend right now, and I will be until I come home for surgery early in July. So I appreciate you guys listening, and I hope that this has been an encouragement to you. I'd love to hear from you. HeidiSt.John.com/Mailbox Monday is the way to reach out to me. If you'd like to bring Jeff to your neck of the woods, get that information to me, and I will pass it on to him. Also, I will link back to in mentions today, HeidiSt.John.com/mentions, a link to Jeff's book. It's extraordinary. Like I said, I have it on my coffee table at home, and it's just an amazing perspective to see God's creation from the vantage point of space. You guys love your people well today and defend the Bible. Come back to a biblical worldview of creation. And I know that God's going to do amazing things through his people as we proclaim the gospel according to the Bible. We love you guys. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you back here again at the intersection of faith and culture.